Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. Let us discuss recent comments from Rebellion Games regarding the Xbox One, PS4 and PC, specifically from the perspective of games development. As there are a couple of interesting points made regarding the CPU of the PS4 and X1. So, I'm sure many of you are aware of the recent comments for many developers regarding the CPU of the PS4 and X1, specifically in the fact that it's fairly slow compared to a PC. And so Rebellion were asked, how different is it regarding the various threads and what type of performance are you getting out of it? And Jean-Baptiste Balcato, hopefully I pronounced that right, probably horribly wrong, but still, said, well, it's not really that different because we had the PS3 and Xbox 360 to deal with, and they are very slow. The PS4 and X1 don't really have a great deal of CPUs, but they do have quite good GPUs. So there's a really good pipe between the two, and they have extremely fast memory. They are good PCs. I'm going to... quote for a second. I'm actually going to somewhat change what the guy's saying because he says a lot, which is kind of annoying to read. So I'm just going to cut that out simply because I'm assuming English isn't his first language. Fairly evidently, anyway. They are good PCs. They are good PCs as a £300 box. You know what I mean, but yes, you're right with the PC. If you take the top-end graphics card and 8-core monster, you can have some real magic. So yeah, I would say it's easier as it's harder to fully exploit the PC back for Sniper Elite 2 as it was made forward for the PC and for the PS3 and Xbox 360. On PC, we were suffering a little bit for that, but now on PC, you can fully tap into the assets for the next generation. We've improved the lighting, much higher resolutions, extreme textures, and tessellations. Also, in addition to that, the developer pointed out that for their title, Sniper Elite, the PC is going to be the lead platform. They said most of their developers play on PC. We submit the game to Sony and Microsoft. The submission process takes several months. During that time, we give the PC version extra polish. We make sure the assets can go and scalable. The bottom line is, before that, all we had is PS3 assets, and we could only scale a little bit, but now we have next-gen assets on the PC. You can push it a lot more textures and more pixels. Now, regarding Xbox One, a lot of people have been knowledgeable about the whole eSRAM fiasco on the Xbox One, and Jean has actually been fairly vocal about this himself. He said it was clearly a bit more complicated to extract the maximum power from the Xbox One than we were trying to do. I think eSRAM is easy to use. The only problem is, part of the problem is it's just too small to output 1080p within the size. It's such a small size that within it you can't really do everything in 1080p, and a little buffer of super fast RAM. It means you have to do chunks or using tricks, tiling it and so on. It's like the reverse of the PS3 when the Xbox 360, when the PS3 was harder to program for than the PS3. Than the Xbox 360. He also pointed out, however, it is becoming easier with the new SDKs that have been released. They're faster, and it's more comfortable running 1080p than it used to be. And they were worried 6 months ago, but they're not really so worried anymore. However, in terms of frame rate, he's stating that the PS4 version does run generally at 60, but it does drop to the 40 and 50. I think that's fairly respectful of the guy, actually. Respectful of him to, us as buyers to actually admit that. But anyway, he said you won't really feel or notice it. I guess we'll find out. I'll do some frame rate tests on it when it's released. But regardless, he said it's also a little bit slower than the Xbox One, but we're hoping to have full parity between the two machines. The only thing the Xbox One have is stereoscopic 3D, as they do not support it. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the comments, because a lot of it is going a lot of over old ground, just how are you finding development on the Xbox 360 and PS3, and obviously that's not really pertinent to our needs or expectations. So I wish the developers would go a little bit more into the details of the CPU of the PS4, because obviously he didn't really give a super in-depth answer as well, at least as in-depth as I'd have liked. but still, a little bit of information there, and I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're slowly digging through a lot of dirt, and we're actually starting to unearth a few treasures regarding the performance of both machines. Now, a few people have actually linked me to some eSRAM stuff, and I will be taking a look at it over the next few days. But really and honestly, from my research, the fact of the matter is, even if the Xbox One was utilizing GDDR5, which obviously it's not, but let's even say in this scenario it was, the GPU of the X1 is still not as powerful as the PS4, which is a real shame in my opinion. I really wish it was a bit more powerful. That's not to say that I think the PS4's GPU is exactly super powerful. I mean, a low-end PC GPU is about as powerful as the PS4 in terms of raw hardware. Obviously, you've got optimizations on the side of it, so that's not really, you know, a huge criticism in this fact of the Xbox One, but it's just something to bear in mind that even if Microsoft do get this eSRAM sorted out, you're not necessarily going to be getting complete parity. However, with that said, I respect the fact that Microsoft are trying. I feel they made the mistake with the hardware, the eSRAM. I feel that they should have gone with a larger amount. Like, for example, I should have gone with like 64 or 128 if they really did want to go with the, you know, the embedded RAM route. I've been fairly vocal on that, but I do feel that it's quite positive that they at least are trying their best to improve the SDKs, and they've actually come on a long way within the last few months. I mean, I can't remember if it was Seaboat or Famous Mortimer. I think it was Famous, and he was saying that when the Xbox One was very first, you know, kind of being unveiled, and developers were kind of finalizing their stuff, the system was awful to work with. It really was, and even the operating system was broken as hell, and it pretty much just come together the last few days before the system's release. In other words, they basically did kind of like working till midnight and finished it, and that's pretty impressive from Microsoft, you know, perspective. It's pretty good that they've managed to fix that. And they are improving things, no doubt. They've still got a way to go, yeah? But a way to go is much better than what they were, and they are improving the situation, because I think that they had a couple of issues against Microsoft. Firstly, their system, you know, it was a lot harder to develop for. In terms of development kits and so on, I don't think they briefed the developers as much from what I'm understanding. Sony's system is actually naturally easier to work with as well, because they've only got one large memory pool rather than like a large memory pool of slow SRAM and a tiny memory pool from really fast RAM. So there's that benefit, plus as well the faster GPU, and I think all of those kind of things together definitely have improved Sony's race. It's basically meant that they've had kind of a rolling start into this generation. I feel Microsoft will definitely start catching up a little bit, simply because well, it's impossible for them not to. Yeah, the eSRAM has definitely been a bit of a hindrance, and I feel that it's still going to become a bit of a pain in the butt. But I think primarily towards the end of the console's life, it's going to pretty much be the GPU. And it's actually fairly surprising that people are focused on the eSRAM, and I understand why, because it's the easy one to figure out. It's like, you know, you see the 32 megs, you're like, oh, what's going on here? That doesn't quite work, especially if you look at the size of a lot of the render targets. I mean, just for example, the amount of RAM that Crysis 3 is running on our GTX 780 Ti at 1440p, which admittedly is far higher than, say, 1080, but that hits like 2 gigs, right? That's pretty damn high. So even if you were to say reduce that by, you know, 50%, you can see how there's a lot of graphics assets there. So obviously it has to be done very differently on Microsoft's platform. They have to definitely utilize a lot of tiling for textures and so on, and we'll be going into that more in a day or two. But in regards to this, I feel that they will start to get an improvement over the eSRAM, but I do feel that the GPU is certainly going to be the thing that kind of holds the system back, which is unfortunate, mostly because it's 1.32 teraflops of computer power versus 1.84. It's not really going to be something that they're going to be able to kind of make up. And obviously you've also got the ROP performance and the lack of, or rather less texture performance with the TMUs. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.